Nikolay, to expose a little bit of your experience and biography, like, can you do a short introduction? What is your background and how you get into the Kaspi Bank?
So I'm 41 years old. I have a math software engineering background. I used to study in St. Petersburg State University as a software developer, but my major working experience is in the area of IT consulting, IT software implementation, solution architecture, etc. So for the most part of my career, I used to work for Oracle for 9 years as a software solution architect, and for SAP as well for 4 years, just prior to joining Kaspi as a chief product officer for one of the streams.
It's really great to hear because I have the discussion like of what makes the product manager or product officer great. And I see a lot of cases when people from technical background is coming. What do you think makes you successful? Because definitely there is a proven record of execution and delivering. What do you think makes you this perfect position for this company and gave you this background?
I've joined not the Kaspi as a huge fintech ecosystem company. I've joined a really small startup in the very beginning, and we used to launch eGrocery delivery as a part of the whole ecosystem, part of e-commerce platform of Kaspi.kz. And back then we only had in the very beginning, we only had 50 employees in total. And it's not only white collars, it's also drivers, warehouse employees, etc. So we only had 10 to 15 people in the office, and the rest were the blue collars, the major manpower people in the fields. In the very beginning, we had to, after the initial launch, we only had 100 orders per day. And currently, after less than 5 years, we have more than 50,000 orders per day, more than 6,000 employees, 10 major warehouses, and we call it dark stores. And we operate in the 5 major cities in Kazakhstan. And actually, New Year is the toughest season for us because we expect more than 100 orders per day in the end of December. This is the major issue for us. That's why we keep all the New Year parties before. Today we'll have a New Year party, and after that we have 2 weeks of preparation for the end of December, the peak loads for our teams. And I personally will work in the warehouse. I will pick the customer orders, etc. And it's not only me. All the C-levels, all the office employees are already split it into groups. We have our roles in the warehouse. We already know what we will do in the end of the year in order to support our teams.
I wouldn't say that it's common practice for the managers to go and do all the end-to-end functionality into the specific startup. So I have a lot of questions, but this one is really interesting. Do you think this practice is unique for Kaspi? And if yes, what are the goals for doing that?
Well, it's not unique. Actually, it's a common practice from Japan called this Kaizen Gemba practice. And we used to apply this practice from the very beginning from the very initial launch of our company, especially for my team, for the product owners, for the product managers. It is really crucial to get in touch with, physically to get in touch with the products, because at least half of our products connected with the warehouse employees, with the drivers, and this is how we make our platform really reliable, good in terms of performance, good in terms of service, etc. So this is actually part of our initial DNA. And in the very beginning, our support for the employees in the field was really crucial. Currently, it's not, actually. Well, speaking about our scale, we expect 100 orders per day, and the office employees will hardly manage to cover 1 or 2% of this load. So it's not crucial for the business anymore, but we keep this practice in place year over year, at least during the New Year season. So everyone in the company should know what's happens on the first floor, because we have office facilities on the second floor and we have a warehouse on the first floor. So normally you don't collaborate with this field with these teams, but everyone, it's not only the product teams, it's like accounting, commercial team, HR, everyone, apart from the really small like percentage, like 3 to 5% of the office employees should stay in the office in order to keep in touch with everything in terms of operations, and the rest should work in the fields.
And I would say fairly a lot of companies is communicating that they keep and engaged all the product team, software engineering with the product to have first-hand experience. But usually it's more like a social accepted answer and visibility. But what really fascinates me, because working with a facility which is collecting the order, delivering, maybe even engaging. And before this session for the recording, we were talking about that, and you said that you've been engaging, even driving the orders to the specific people. So it's pretty unique as an action, and I really like this cultural approach. But I would like to go a little bit back. Like you mentioned that the startup was acquired by Kaspi, and like I think a lot of people out there is interested why those decisions are made, because it usually the perception is that the big corporate company, they can build from the scratch, which potentially can be cheaper or faster. What are the reasons? Maybe not for the Kaspi, but high level, when a big existing business which is already have resources, liquidity, cash, maybe even cash flow to build the teams, they making a decision to acquire the business and build into the infrastructure rather than building from the scratch.
Actually, we were in partnership with Kaspi from the very beginning. We were a merchant on the Kaspi e-commerce platform almost from the very launch of our product. And after least than 1 year working in parallel, the startup was acquired by Kaspi. And actually, it wasn't like pure startup built in the field. The startup itself was launched as a separate company under the major retailer brand in Kazakhstan. So anyway, it's not like a pure startup story. From the very beginning, we had a huge brand name as a support for our marketing strategy, etc. And we had a really good connection with Kaspi from the very beginning. But back then, we had the common rules and we had a common approach, like with the others merchants. Like everything was similar for us, and we had no specifically tailored buttons, options, preferences unique for our eGrocery stream. But later on, everything changed. So we used to skyrocket in terms of the volumes, in terms of the number of orders. The customer satisfaction rates were really high. Almost from the very beginning, Kaspi very quickly decided to acquire this solution under the whole ecosystem umbrella. And it actually makes sense in terms of the business, because for the e-commerce, the e-grocery type of business model makes a really frequent delivers into very frequent rate in terms of the customer purchase. So we have very loyal customers, like with at least 5 or 7 orders per month, but we even have customers like 2 or 3 orders per week. So it's a huge frequency, and it's very crucial to be such an anchor for the whole e-commerce platform and for the ecosystem in total.
Usually it's not purely the financial part or the team part. It's a combination about what strategically the startup will fit into the ecosystem of the corporate business, what values it brings. And if there is a synergy in terms of the customer values, it clicks quite fast. And that's the case when by having the support from big brands, you deliver it quite unique values for the customers as a loyalty, as a usability, I assume, like, because for making those orders, it should be really solving your issues and giving a new way how you actually order groceries, etc., etc. And it takes us to the question about building the culture in the team between engineering product team. So what do you think would would take you to build this workflow where you're working together with the development team and the product team and the whole business and makes like the synergy and common values. So I would like to go deep into the building the team culture.
Yeah, I think this part is also pretty unique. I mean, in terms of the market-wide, all other companies. So we have really small, relatively small teams, product development teams, and actually those teams report directly to the C-levels. So we don't have complex business versus IT silos comparing to other huge companies like multi-billion dollars company, because Kaspi is actually a multi-billion dollar company listed in Nasdaq. And anyway, we have a pretty small teams with specific directly responsible individuals responsible for a specific product with specific metric. Those teams, they have the almost the full initiatives in terms of proposition for any kind of features and all anything, but you should prove it with any some kind of hypothesis, with some kind of data. We are not really afraid of mistakes. We're really afraid of the long and very expensive mistakes. So everything we do should be pretty fast. I mean, in terms of weeks, not months and quarters. So we do not approve any kind of changes in terms of features and all these product development procedures. We don't approve anything longer than 3 months product development life cycle. In case we have this kind of long, very long strategy, we should divide it into smaller steps. We should test everything prior to launching the development cycle. For the full digital products, it's pretty easy with like very typical A/B tests, etc. But for the offline plus online product development, we even tested via like additional Excel, manual stuff, Telegram bots, anything that can support us with like shorter MVP hypothesis testing prior to starting the complex and pretty expensive product development.
Oh, that sounds pretty interesting because I can hear the three things which makes it unique. The organizational structure, and I know that big corporations they tend to have layers of layers and peeling the onion until the stuff is coming into the execution. I think the second part that you said is purely engineering. Like in engineering, you have the decoupling of the features. Even the most complex stuff can be split into the parts, and then those parts can be executed and delivered and tested. And the third thing, which is more startup that I heard, is like a fail fast. Even if you know that in specific cases it might fail, you need to know it quite fast. So you do the things, you test the market, you prove that the model is or the approach is not working, and then you fail it fast. Okay, that totally makes sense. So the second part that I would like to talk is about the product experimentation, because if you have an ability to put the metrics and fail fast, like what you do and what is the nature for experimenting and doing the things, putting them to the market and test, like what is the cultural approach and overall approach for adding something and experimenting with the product?
So everything relies on data and the customer feedback from the very beginning. So, and coming back to the leadership team, including CEO, they always in touch with the product development, but not in a dictating feature mode. They're like controlling what you are doing and how it correlates with the customer feedback and like from the data perspective. So technically, I have three major pillars in terms of the product features. The first one is everything around GMV or profitability. So we either increase the amount of sales, reduce the costs, etc. This is the typical pillar from the product development. The second one is everything around the customer service, because we have a number of customer inquiries, a number of customer incidents, and we should constantly reduce this number. So currently we have really good industry-wide number of percentage ratio for like the part of the gross volumes of sales. I mean, the we have 0.4% of customer incidents. It seems like a huge achievement for our team because and we are trying to reduce this number anyway, but currently we are like hitting the wall because we are growing fast in parallel and we have really tons of new hires, like tons of new employees. And it takes time for them to properly educate in terms of processes in order not to make mistakes, etc. That's why we're like almost on the edge with this number, but anyway, we are not giving up. We are trying to reduce this number of incidents anyway. And the third one is the scalability, because as I told you before, we've grown from hundreds orders per day to 50K orders per day currently. And year over year, it was like a huge shift for the company. In the very beginning, I knew everyone. I knew all the drivers, all the employees in the warehouse. Currently, I'm not really familiar to, and I don't know, I think like 80% in the office. I mean, I'm talking about only white collars. I don't know all the warehouse managers, I mean, the management team of the warehouses. So it's a completely different company currently. So scalability takes its cost, not only from the organizational perspective, but on the IT software perspective as well. We need to apply additional controls, additional tools for the middle management, etc., in order to support this scalability and the growth processes.
It sounds like a really important change management here is happening, because a lot of people, they're underestimating scaling or rocket skying from, I don't know, hundreds of people to thousands of people. And it brings really interesting question from the management perspective, because you said that you used to know people. And when you have a relatively small team, you can fix a lot of things in personal way. Like you can go, you can talk, you can explain. But when you're managing as a product manager or even as a generalized management, you're managing hundreds of people and you don't know most of them in a phase. You cannot utilize the personal tools like, and you said that you have metrics, and a lot of people are trying to put OKRs, some metrics, and sometimes even in the industry, there are vanilla metrics. Like you can measure something which looks good, but for real, it's not influencing and impacting the product. So what do you think is important when you scaling up with the thousands of people? What metrics or what logic you should use for building those metrics and provide the tools for the middle management to hit the expectations, and even for the ordinary, I don't know, person who is a software engineer or a driver in warehouse to understand what is required from the company level, them to be delivered.
We have actually we have a metric in terms of the OKRs and KPIs, and the product managers, they have the same business metrics as the end business. We have like more than 10 product team in our stream, and we have like two products directly connected with the HR KPIs, for example. 5 guys and ladies also directly working with the operations, warehouses, transportations, etc. And these teams, they have the same compensation in terms of like bonuses and motivation as the counterparties from the business party. For the software engineers, it's a bit different because they do not directly affect the business metrics, but they have their own metrics in terms of time to market and quality of the product. Because we had an issues with like several iterations in terms of launching feature or like some basic products, like back and forth development, QA, launch, so many back issues, errors, let's roll back, etc. So that's why we have the quality and time to market KPIs for the software development team. For the QAs, for the like for DevOps, it's a bit different also. So this is how it works in our case.
It totally makes sense, and it's quite smart, because usually people are not focusing on the time to deliver. And this one I think is really crucial, because taking back that you have the short life cycles, which should not exceed 3 months, and I assume they even shorter in real life, like for doing the assumption, testing with the market, and then delivering to the product and see how it affects the optimization of the cost or the quality for the customer services. It totally makes sense. And coming back to the experimentation, like what experiments, I understand the optimization of the cost, but what experiments you are doing for the strategic move? Because that's also the question. You can do a lot of tactics, like, I don't know, recolor the button, re-implement UI to have more user experience. But do you have something which is on the strategic level, but still have those short life cycles?
Well, we do, and I cannot expose everything
Yeah,
actually.
sure.
And well, generally, we have a really huge data science team. Like we have huge amounts of data, like separate people who's really looking for an insights in order how to make our products better. Like those are like general procedures. I think every advanced company has it. And in parallel, we are always looking for like new business models actually, because currently we are testing 2 or 3 models in parallel, additional business models, because we are pretty confident with basic business we have now. We can more or less easily support the growth, the current state of expansion. In parallel, we are always looking for new possibilities in the market. That's why we have like several sandbox infrastructures in parallel, and we are testing like, I wouldn't disclose you anything now, unfortunately, but I can tell you in December 2026 how we will launch like everything next year. Like now it's a bit too early to disclose everything.
Absolutely. I'm not looking to hear like the specific things, but what I already heard, and that's a part of the question, how you making sure that with the short life cycles, you're meeting the strategic approaches and strategic changes. So the outcome one, you're constantly experimenting with additional business models to the dark store deliveries, because it's a specific business with a specific expectation from the clients, but I assume there are experimentation with other business lines, which is also can be put into the short life cycle. And the second part, which is more technical, but I think it's good and worth to mention to our listeners, in order to experiment, you should have a technical ability. And I can hear that you have sandboxes. People usually underestimate because they so focus on getting the things in production. And usually the area where they work, like the development sandbox, is usually not for the, I don't know, internal or even external testing. And the outcome that you gave, like you have a way to expose something that is shortcoming or long coming to the others and give maybe experimentation for integration with those sandboxes to the third parties, which is creating partnership and ability to develop new business models. So that's exactly what I wanted to understand, because lots of people, they're underestimating this need for the scalable infrastructure, not just scale the production, but having an ability to run on different environments, which can be used for different purposes. That's pretty cool.
Yes, in our case, sandbox doesn't mean only the IT infrastructure. It also means we have a dedicated physical infrastructure for the sandbox testing. We have special lab for both for IT and for, I would say, offline part as well. Actually, it's not even one laboratory, it's a set of different facilities for all kind of hypothesis testing, etc., in order not to make mistakes with like huge investments. And we should test everything up front.
And that's really wow, because I think lots of people are afraid of changes, and like you're stuck in a limbo when you grasp that there is a need to change, but you're so focused to, in the long run, to plan it, to make everything perfect, which in reality, that takes you as specifics, as you said, sandbox with all the processes set up. And I assume it's including drivers, collectors for the orders. And like you cannot know everything in advance, but the best way to prove that your hypothesis is worth to be updated on the production, to run it in this simulated environment, check all the ins and outs. Maybe we missed something, or I don't know.
We always missing something. We always have any kind of mistakes, anything. Yes, without this, we would be in a huge mess with like all these projects.
It's another takeaway. I really admire this appetite for changing, breaking the things, but then in the end fixing and making sure that it's scalable and updates the customer service and optimize the cost. Because that seems to be the only way to progress really fast pace in kind of red market environment. So thank you for highlighting that. Another angle that we discussed before, it's robotics in warehouse, and I kind of assume that's it's kind of experimentation, and we talked about that before. So what is the need or the processes that are happening in your side to optimize this ability to collect the orders and maybe do the robotics for doing that?
It's a very interesting topic for me now because I've spent like decades working with WMS, supply chain solutions. And if you had asked me like 5 years ago anything about warehouse robotics, I would most probably I would giving you the standard enterprise answer. It is like it's really powerful, but it's a really heavy lift, very complex, very expensive. And we used to talk about like multi-million dollars, like 1 or 2 years implementations, very expensive and rigid hardware. And you basically you just bolt this hardware to the floor and you just pray anything will be stable and your business model won't change it, and etc. Today, the conversation is completely different, and we are really into this robotics topic for almost 2 years now. We had reviewed like more than 10 solutions specifically designed for our needs in the warehouse across the globe, from Europe, from China, from other countries, like small niche like startups, etc. We had two MVPs delivered specifically based on our requests. The first one was last year and it wasn't really successful. And the second one was launched like in the beginning of this year. And we had pretty good results in September. So we have already a laboratory in one of our warehouses with the robotic module, at least one, and we are expecting 5 more to come till the end of January with different modifications. And we're testing everything top down, software wise, hardware wise, in order to get like deep understanding. So yeah, so currently robotics is not just only for like huge companies like Amazon or Alibaba. It's really affordable. It another thing, we can easily integrate it with our manual processes also. And actually, we call it like we had a discussion internally with our engineers. So we call it open source momentum for hardware for robotics. You may remember we had it like 5 to 10 years ago, even like 15 years ago, this shift from expensive enterprise software to open source solution. So this might be like 10 or 15 years ago, you need a Oracle license, expensive license to run a database. And now you just spin like Postgres on AWS in like minutes, and everything is extremely simple now. And I think it's even a possibility like for companies like yours to step into robotics as well. It's a pure greenfield, and it's not like so currently it's not about you making it or not. It's a question either you make it now or you will be really late in terms of all the shifts in the industry. And another important topic, it's not only about the major trend for countries like US with the huge minimum hour wages rates comparing to our regions. Even for our country, the ROIs for these kind of products are less than 3 years, less than 2 years, depending on the area of implementation. So yeah, now ROIs are really attractive not only for engineering teams, but also for the department of CFO.
It's absolutely great to hear, because I think those breaking moments in industries when you have the industry level like a hard to solve challenges, and the communities they finding out the ways to put together the skills, the knowledge, and develop the products that can be commonly and widely used as an open source, as you mentioned, Postgres. Like we have a lot of software. And even the scalability of the current modern digital product lays a lot in the field of Kubernetes, the tools for scalability, which even big companies, they put together the forces and they did foundations, which then open sourced a lot of things for current infrastructure. As you mentioned, AWS and put in Postgres. Postgres is open source and Kubernetes is open source. And even Alibaba with the Tencent, they put a lot of efforts to make this happen from the scalability point. So it gave really great insights. And usually in the end of the episode, I'm trying to ask the question, we discussed a lot of things. Is there anything that I didn't ask you today that you would like to answer?
Actually, there's nothing specific. I just want everyone to be like more open-minded. Like we have this AI hype currently in everywhere. It's not only in IT, it's everywhere. And let's not only focus on these trends, which is actually it's pretty important. We have AIs like tons of different models in our different products, and it's a common practice already. But let's not forget additional stuff. Like in our case, it's robotics, but for different companies, it might be something else. So let's not be really like very straightforward with the trend. Let's be like more open-minded to the more like broader trends and expansion in all kinds of technology.
That's a really good outtake. So hype in technology and hype in trends, they come and go, but there is always bare bone business processes like optimization of the cost with the robotics, with the fintechs. It's usually compliance and making sure that you're in regulations and a lot of things. Which even if the hype exists, doesn't mean that we should not focus or execute properly.